Dia Guiv Galera Cordia August Foil to wrote, welcome to be my guest with me, Mary Honan on LíR Media TV, supporting the Samaritans, Limerick and Tipperary, Clare's Wish Foundation in Limerick, and Deel Animal Rescue in West Limerick. And my wonderful guest today, really looking forward to interviewing Sarah Beasley. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Mary, and thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
It's an absolute pleasure. I said to you off camera, I have a feeling we share a lot in common, not least the fact that I think you were born in the UK, the same as myself. But you're into animal welfare and the homeless situation is a specific target with you. But just to introduce you further, you were secretary for Maurice Quinlivan, Sinn Féin, and then you joined up with Aontú, which is a relatively new party. What was it about Aontú? And I presume it's your social conscience, you have a strong social conscience, but what was it about Aontú that drew you to them?
Well, I suppose, Mary, the 2018 referendum was when, after the back of that, Aontú was formed. And I suppose I never had to question my social conscience. I moved here, I knew that obviously divorce wasn't allowed, abortion, but I thought that was, a good thing as well.
Yeah.
And coming from England and seeing people having abortion on demand up until 6 months, I just found it horrendous. And as I say, I didn't realise I was put into a bracket here in Ireland, but I was put into the pro-life bracket, and I'm very proud of that. Conscience-wise, I could not think of a reason why abortion should be allowed into the country. I know people say it's a woman's choice, but I think there's other choices around actually killing the unborn. And obviously I reached out to Paddy because I was in a squeeze situation working for Sinn Féin, where they became very hostile to me because of my conscience. And unfortunately, it is what it is. And I was forced out of my position. Now, it is what it is. I'm very proud to be able to stand up for my values. And I suppose I worked with Paddy from the outset. We had basically formed Cherish All the Children. And then we decided with a group of like-minded people to form a new political party to shake up the establishment, which I think we are doing.
What does Aontú stand for?
It stands for life, which obviously is our pro-life values, unity, we're a Republican party, and economic justice, which is justice for all.
So it's life in the holistic, in the holistic way, the life of the unborn, the life of the living, and the life of those that are downtrodden. Yes.
And I mean, we recently had our Ardèche, and we actually voted on the fact that all life, whether it's, pigs, cows, humans, dogs, cats, we value them all. And we can have a lot of very strong bills that we've brought in to protect our animals. So one is pet theft, so that there will be a jail sentence if you're caught stealing a beloved family pet.
But Sarah, that needs to have been brought in a long time ago. I mean, I have two pets, and I just think that if any of them was stolen, I would go insane without them. And people don't realize that a family pet to some people are their family.
Yeah. Yeah.
In most cases, family pets are your family anyway, no matter how big your family is, they become an extension of it. And for somebody to just treat them as a commodity, come in and take them, it's the same as taking a family member. And they should be charged in exactly the same way.
I agree totally. And I think with the pandemic, we've seen an increase in pet theft. And I think that's when we really sat down and said, look, we need to have stronger animal welfare. This act in 2013 isn't fit for the animals that we have. And it's the same with puppy farming. You can see now people are just buying, certain breeds of dogs, and I don't really agree with that. I think, sometimes mongrels are the best. They are a
Mine
mix of all different
mine are
breeds.
mixed breeds.
Yeah, I'm the same.
Well,
And
I
I just
always
think,
had a purebred. I had a boxer Shannon, and she was beautiful. And I had a Japanese chin and a Yorkshire Terrier, tiny, second smallest in the country, Yorkie. And there was always something wrong with them.
yeah,
Health wise, there was always something, because they're so I suppose purely bred.
yeah,
The two I have now, thank God, Tip Wood, I've never had a day's trouble with them, if you like.
yeah. No, I mean that they are. I mean that mine are my little girls, and I take them to bed and everything. Even though we vowed when we got them that they wouldn't go up the stairs, but of course they rule the house now.
It's terrible, but with the current situation, and now the government, after bringing in these emergency laws again and passing it again, I'm just appalled, because I'm there thinking to myself, look at all the people now that are homeless, who haven't got the luxury of stay home, stay safe. We're all in this together. They're lovely tag words. They really are lovely tag words, Sarah. But in reality, if a mother has to leave her house or leave the hotel that she's staying in with her children at 9 o'clock in the morning, and can't be there, back in there again until 9 o'clock that night, how, number one, are we cherishing all children equally in this country? And how is that mother supposed to be helping their child to study when the child can just get back home at 9 o'clock or into a bed at 9 o'clock with no computer? There's no equality. And now you have the lockdown again, and people are going to be again in depressive conditions. And even people who have homes, the depression on them from being locked down.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't understand how this has gone on again.
Yeah, I just don't understand how the TDs and the Dáil think it's okay to extend this emergency legislation, and the effect on the homelessness in the last year has just been terrible. I mean, I got figures. There's 2,500 people that are availing of HAP in Limerick at the moment, and most of them are substandard properties. It's 180,000 vacant properties across the state, which is just incredible. And there's 260 in Limerick that are actually boarded up. Now, we have 238 families in homeless accommodation at the moment. So that just, opened them up. Like you said, in the UK, they had this £1 buy your own house schemes in Liverpool and Leeds. And effectively, that's what should be done here. I mean, people that I'm dealing with, they say to me, just give us the keys and they'll do the houses up themselves.
No-brainer. It's a no-brainer, Sarah. I thought it was a no-brainer. And they had up in the headlines, Honan's houses for £1 or for €1. Because that was Nick Rabbits had put that headline up, because I just thought there's so many good conditioned derelict houses around the place, and there's so many people crying out for a house whose brothers, sisters, husbands are unemployed tradesmen, and could do up these houses, and after 5 years, once they've proven that they've complied with every bit of the regulation, that house is theirs for £1 or €1 in our case. Nothing done. I asked the mayor as well. He came on my show. He was very lovely, but nothing seemed to have been done in that respect. And the houses, meanwhile, are deteriorating further. And the council are saying things like, "Well, we don't have the money." And you said off camera to me that they do have the money.
Yeah, central government sent down the funding to them. Now, when we ask it, they've said it's because of the COVID. And yet some schemes, like up in Garryowen, they were still continuing to build throughout lockdown. So it seemed one rule for one and one rule for another. And they just seem to be making it up as they go along. What they'll say to us then is it's European standards that they have to bring it up to. But there's examples of houses in my Ross and houses up in South Hill that are 2 years old. that people have been moved on, transferred out, and the houses have been locked up, boarded up. And that just gives an impression as well of areas that are trying to be regenerated, that it's going back to the same way, and it is. I mean, houses in Weston have been condemned, but yet they're not knocking them, so people don't know where they're going to be living. You know, St Mary's Park is a complete disaster for regeneration. They knock more houses than they built again. So the whole housing in Limerick is it's just a disaster. And like, I do street homelessness, and, you know, the despair of those homeless people when COVID was really severe at March last year. I mean, like you say, at 9 o'clock, they were being sent out to wander the street all day, scared of what this COVID was, because I suppose at the beginning, everyone was frightened of it. We were watching all the deaths in Italy. And these poor people, they were told to put a mask on. They didn't understand why. They just were coming out. I mean, we were doing street outreach every night. And of course, I was nervous myself about COVID, but you have to go out and feed these people.
Someone has to. I mean, it's just, you know, people can be lucky. You want to be an incredibly strong woman or man, and not have a big family to actually survive something like that. And I understand, Sarah, this thing where they say, oh, we have to build new houses, we have to build houses here and there. What about all the empty houses that are boarded up? You go up Hyde Road, and nearly every second house, fine houses, could be occupied by families. And it's an insult to a misfortunate family walking the streets all day long after collecting their child from school until 9 o'clock at night in 2021.
Exactly. And they will take anything. That, you know, they're not being fussy, these people. I mean, at the moment, there's 238 families in emergency accommodation in Limerick. And that ranges from hotels to hubs. Now, the hub was only meant to be 6 months. It was a transition housing. People have been in there 3.5 years, you know, and come the lockdown, I mean, one floor, the whole family's caught COVID. And yet when we said it to the charity that runs it, they were claiming that COVID wasn't in the building. Now, I rang them and I said, this is not good enough, because at least tell families that there is COVID in the building and they could take the right precautions. But there seems to be a denial from the housing department to some of the homeless charities. They don't want to be called out on what's happening.
But you know, Sarah, it's written into our constitution that every child is cherished equally. They're lovely words, but that's all they are words, because there is no parity between children in this country. I mean, forget about sending your child to a boarding school or private education. That's your choice. If you have the money, fantastic. All our parents would have done it for us if they had the money. And I'm all for that choice of schools that you go to. But if you choose to go to a school, or you're living in an area, you should have the basic rights of every human being should have the same basic rights, the rights to a decent education and the rights to a roof over their head.
Exactly. I mean, I went to private school in England. I was blessed because my parents could afford to do it. And it made an incredible difference to my life growing up, because even down to job opportunities, because of the school that was on my CV. And I was just very lucky. But there's people out there now in 2021 that sometimes they don't even go to school because the parents are so exhausted with just life. And
depression as well, because and now I think, you know, these lockdowns are only going to exacerbate it further. I mean, anyone that was just about coming to the end of their tether and saying, well, we're almost out of it now, and being told you're back in it, and apparently the emergency legislation, there's a provision there that it could go on until 2027.
Yeah, it's a power game. Yesterday, Paddy Tabine spoke in the Deel in relation to the fact that children under the age of 16, if they're not vaccinated, can't go and play volleyball or, go on school trips. Now, that's discrimination at its finest, because that is forcing parents into, in my mind, mandatory vaccines, and we're totally against that. Again, it's choice if you want to get vaccinated.
But it's creating a two-tier system. It's no different from any form of discrimination, and people mightn't like to hear that. They might think, oh well, they're trying to protect, but there's always an excuse for creating a discriminatory situation, and it can be brought in easier if you think, oh well, they're trying to protect us. It's only the unvaccinated, or it's only some unvaccinated can't have vaccines. Some are petrified of vaccines because there's a history in their family, maybe of clots and things like that, and some are just being cautious. But everyone has a right to make, in the same way, Sarah, as they paid for young girls to come back into this country, to fly back in to vote for a woman's right to choice. Surely a person has a right to choose what they inject into their bodies.
Well, that's it. I mean,
without being discriminated against.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what they're doing. I mean, we were due to hold our Ardèche in person on the 23rd of October because it was Freedom Day. As it turned out, we had to do it online because we just didn't want to discriminate. We just didn't want to discriminate people not being allowed into the venue because they didn't have a vaccine passport. So what, like we said, do we stand at the door and say you can come in because you're vaccinated, but you can't come in because you're not vaccinated? And that's a question. I mean, that was meant to be finished now in October, and again we're going into Christmas, and I'd say they'll lock us down again, and it's the point of cruelty at this stage.
Well, there's nothing worse, I don't think, than moving goalposts. People can cope with a finite line and be told you're going to be 1 year in lockdown and no flights in, no flights out. But they left on one day there a couple of months back, they left 20,000 people in to Ireland on flights, and they had the whole country locked down. So people were getting off flights. They were being told, when you get to your destination, quarantine for 10 days. Now, you tell me anybody that was going to fly into Ireland on a holiday that was going to quarantine for the entire holiday in a hotel room.
Yeah.
So they were getting into buses, into taxis, into cars, and going on their way. And they were expected then to, once they got to their destination, all they were asked for was their address or where they were staying. Sure, they could have given any address. Yeah.
No, I just think this whole COVID has been, I think Ireland's got it the worst in Europe, if not the world.
And what's even more mystifying is that we have one of the highest rates of vaccination in the world and the highest rates of COVID. Now, you riddle me that, Sarah.
Well, we actually keep on drumming it into the door. Every time Padda speaks, he said, well, if you can be vaccinated but still get COVID and pass it on to an unvaccinated person, then what's the point of all this? Just open up the country and let us live.
Shouldn't we just be able to take testing before you go into in some place? Take a test if you're clear. You've done it in good faith and you've gone in.
We've been calling for antigen testing for the last year, and Stephen Donnelly keeps on saying that it's all to do with finances and cost. But surely to God, to have the country open up, society opened up, we'd be spending more money, and we just like that get an antigen test before we go into a venue.
That's all you need is an antigen test, in my view, in my humble view. I mean, my doctorate isn't in medicine or anything. It's on childhood under Nazism. But I look at the same parallels happening. People being told you can't sit, you can't come in here because you're, say, gay, or you're a Jew, or you're disabled, or you're unvaccinated, or you haven't complied, or you don't fit what you're being told there's, discrimination is discrimination, and it starts at very, very small levels, and it grows and grows and grows if it's allowed. If it's allowed to take hold, it's going to be, oh, it's only the unvaccinated today. Then it's, who is it tomorrow?
Yeah.
Where does it end? Discrimination of all sorts must, I had the polio vaccine as a child, and it was the best thing my mother ever did for me, was to get the polio vaccine in the UK.
Yeah.
She refused to take thalidomide when she was pregnant on me, and thank God she did, because it was the wonder drug that was eventually pulled off the market. I've had every MMR, every vaccine known to man, but every time I take a flu vaccine, I end up in hospital on nebulizers and oxygen, because I'm severe asthmatic. Now, my father died of a clot, and clots are in my family. So it's petrifying for people in all different walks of life. They have their own reasons for being wary or skeptical. And now they're being discriminated against and treated as social pariahs and as anti-vaxxers. I hate that phrase, anti-vax, because there's many people out there not taking the vaccine out of fear, and because there's not enough information, and nobody with an alternative voice has been heard. It's only the one narrative all the time.
I mean, yes, if you say anything negative, then automatically you're being told you're an anti-vaxxer. Now, I got my vaccine because I have rheumatoid arthritis, and I was more or less told I had to have it taken. Then I had the AstraZeneca, and next thing, a week later, it comes out there's blood clots. And I was terrified. And yet my son, who's 19, is refusing to take the vaccine because he's worried what it will do to his health. And I completely understand that. So we've got a mixed household, half is vaccinated and half is unvaccinated.
My father was Protestant, my mother was Catholic, so I understand the mixed house and mixed marriage. You have a mixed family.
we have the discussion around it, and I just said, at the end of the day, everyone has to make those choices themselves, and we're being forced, manhandled as far as I'm concerned, and now this whole booster scenario. So is it that we're going to continuously have to have vaccines? This is my contention all the time, Sarah. If the vaccine was supposed to be giving people, they were saying this vaccine didn't stop you getting the virus, but stopped you being really sick. But then how come it's like they're trying to blame, they say 7% hasn't taken it. It's like as if they're trying to blame the 7% for the 50% that are in hospital with it. Yeah. But what about the other 50% who are fully vaccinated? I mean, the narrative now is as well, isn't it? It's the young children and under 16s that are causing the rise in the COVID again. But then again, it's really pushing parents to get the children vaccinated. And I think that's so wrong. It's an individual choice what you do.
But now they might be telling it, all this might be 100% correct. But what I disapprove of is the lack of debate. The minute anybody, a doctor, scientist, immunologist, anyone challenges the status quo or the narrative, despite their qualifications, their eminent qualifications in the field of virology, they're being called anti-vaxxers.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like if you don't share, and now, I mean, Stephen Donnelly said it yesterday in the Dáil. He was saying, that Sinn Féin and the Democrat or independents were all going to be voting against it, and shame and all this. And the two from Kerry, I keep forgetting their names, Healy-Raes, they were right. They stood up and they said, how dare you? We're representing people. And you're saying basically that we should be ashamed of ourselves for having an alternative view or voice.
Yeah. Well, it's like I say that this. I think it's very, very worrying that they are extended the legislation, because to me that's it's a control thing, and I think they're very nervous as well that the government is not doing very well at the moment, and if the restrictions were lifted, I think there would be an election on its way, and I think they're quite nervous about that. So they're quite happy to keep us in a semi-lockdown state. Even down to marching on the street now. I think there was 70,000 in Navan took to the streets in relation to them shutting the hospital, the A&E out there.
That's right,
because
yes.
they're telling us that we need A&E beds for COVID, acute beds, and yet they're shutting them down around the country.
But this is another thing, Sarah. Why should the people of Ireland do any more than they've done to try and help the health service? Shouldn't the government be ploughing everything instead of giving themselves pay rises at every drop of a hat? Shouldn't they be putting every penny they have into the health service to build up the health service so that people aren't? I mean, I don't see the point of us being locked down interminably to try and help a health service that should be helping the people. Isn't that the way it should be? I mean, I don't understand that.
Yeah, they had 18 months really, didn't they, to get more ICU beds. But then they'll say it's a lack of staff. Well, they need to start paying people the appropriate rate. I think the nurses and the doctors here are not paid nearly enough for what they have to do. And it's the same with the Gardaí. I mean, to be honest, would you really, when you leave university, sign up to be in one of those positions? Because I think a guard starts on €22,000.
But you look at the student nurses. I mean, that's another bone of contention I have, is the fact that a student nurse, one was telling me when I was in hospital, that they pay €70 for parking space at the hospital to park their cars. They have to pay for their petrol, their accommodation, their studies at university, and they get not one penny to work in the hospitals until they're actually qualified in their first year after qualification. That to me is another form of slave labor.
Yeah.
If it's now compulsory, they have to work so long in a hospital in order to get their qualification, and they're not getting one penny for the work that they're doing. How does that instill one confidence in a student who is going to college to be a nurse? They want to be profoundly dedicated to what they're doing, because they go in then and they spend the bones of a year, 2 years in a hospital without pay.
I know. I mean, I think it needs overhauled. I mean, the same thing was when they called all the Irish nurses back, and they didn't use them then when they came all the way back to Ireland.
They were charging them. They were charging them to re-register during a pandemic.
Yeah.
You couldn't make it up.
Yeah. And again, it's like you say, the word discrimination. I mean, people are being discriminated every walk of life at the moment. And I think if they try and do another lockdown, I think people will take to the streets because the elderly, I mean, is this the way they want to live their final year or 2 years?
No. I mean that's there you go with another. If half of the elderly patients hadn't been just taken out of hospitals and put into nursing homes, no windows open, no fresh air, no sunlight, no company, no familiarity of voice. For those, a colleague of mine in the station, Pat Barry, his mother died in a nursing home, 91 years of age, with Alzheimer's. She spent the last 6 months of her life, and the only voice she knew was one of her sons, and she wasn't even allowed that.
I know. I mean, when you saw the people having to wave through to their relatives in a nursing home, I think that was actually one of the saddest. It was
abuse of the highest order, in my view.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's happening again. I mean, the regional is in lockdown at the moment, and there's people out there that are very, very sick, and the families can't go and see them. And, we know they're under pressure. but still, I mean, there has to be
There
some
has to
type
be
of,
humanity.
yes,
There has to be common sense in all of this. I mean, the one thing that's going to make somebody go downhill rapidly is being deprived of hope.
yeah,
I mean, as I say, in my research, that was the one thing when I've interviewed any survivors or their children, and they've all said the one thing that got them through. Viktor Frankl even said it: you can live without faith, you can live without religion, you can live without food for a long, long time. But the one thing you cannot live without is hope, because it's the only thing that will keep driving you on. And if people they can have all the nurses and doctors around them protecting them and wrapping, but if they've lost all sense of hope, that they're either never going to see their family again, or they're never going to hear that voice again.
Well, I was in Auschwitz. I did the death camps about 10 years ago. And it's one thing I said afterwards, that every child should go on a trip to Auschwitz and see what can be done by another human to a human. I think it's the most incredible lesson that everyone should learn.
Well, it didn't start in a vacuum. It started with whispers.
Exactly.
It didn't start with death camps, and it didn't start with gas chambers, and it didn't start with experimental places like Mathusen or Bullenhuser Dam or any place like that where they were experimenting. It didn't start with any of that. It started with people turning and turning against and being turned against their neighbor, and being told, oh, they're a Jew, or they're a gypsy, or they're gay, or whatever. So it was all right because it was just them. But eventually it was just more and more and more and more restrictions were being put on people. And that's the worry I have, is that, I mean, I don't think anything will compare to what happened during World War II. But it didn't start in a bubble.
No.
It started with whispers. It started with alienation. It started with rights being taken from one group of people, and other people either afraid to say anything, or didn't care, or agreed with it, or people who said, oh, but sure, it's only them, it's not us, we're fine. We're okay. The I'm all right, Jack attitude.
Yeah. It was dividing society. Like, they saw the Jews as rich and exploiting their culture, when in actual fact they were adding to the culture. And it's only when
but I mean, that's just an excuse at the end of the day, and it's the same excuse. It's the same excuse with everything. It's the same with South Africa, the apartheid in South Africa and things like that. If you have, the excuse now is that it's for protecting, protecting humanity and that. But what about people who just have reservations, people who have medical conditions that can't have it? Their rights are being trampled on.
Yeah. Well, I said it, Mary, really, when 2018 I saw a country, Ireland, which I love. I couldn't believe how people turned against each other just in relation to the single vote of abortion. And my fear was, and what I said at the very beginning was, it will start at very rare, which it has not been very rare when there's been over 13,500 abortions. And it will end up being up to 6 months. I can see it, because people are just going with the flow, or it was very acceptable to say, it's my body, I can police it myself. Well, why then has there been, that amount of abortions if it was only meant to be very, very rare, as Leo Varadkar said?
Yeah, but as well as that, if that was a slogan that was being used for the abortion referendum, was my body, my choice. But that doesn't seem to be, and the government were using it. I just want to ask you, Sarah, how difficult, why, how I put this, when you're part of a party you're being expected to follow the party line. That's, I have a problem with that, I have to say. I have a problem with, I think that people abdicate everything to the party. And if the party says you've got to do something, you were saying there earlier that you got into trouble with Sinn Féin because of your views on pro-life, your pro-life views. And I'm just saying, what is so wrong with somebody being in Sinn Féin, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Aontú, and having an individual choice? I mean, you look at this vote now yesterday. It only won by 3 votes.
Yeah,
3 people swung that and have decided basically what will happen with this country until February or until April, isn't it? April.
Yeah, April.
And potentially until 2027, because they have that built in. 3 people have actually made that choice. Would those 3 people have made that choice if they weren't part of the party?
You see, I think this party whip is an awful thing, because everyone should have a freedom of what way they want to vote. We were being told what way we wanted to vote, or if we put anything up on social media that wasn't the party line, that we would get into trouble. And my job was on the line, but still I felt it really important to me, once you kill a baby, the unborn, then we're going down a slippery slope, and it is cherish all the children. And I thought that we should be sticking to that proclamation at the end of the day. And it was tough. It was a tough 2 years for me, health-wise. I went really downhill. And then I just said, I'm coming back. And the best way sometimes to fight the attacker is to actually come back and do good. And I really, really miss doing housing and homelessness work. So once I got my health under control, I just said, I'm coming back to do this. And I love being on the ground. I love helping people. And it's like I say, to extend a hand to a homeless person, because it could be you or I, it could be our children, it could be our nieces, nephews, cousins. Addiction can hit anybody, and a lot of the homelessness on the street is through addiction, unfortunately. And they just need a helping hand to get out of that as well and get back into transitional housing, and then hopefully to get their own homes. And it can be done.
And I don't think people want a handout. I think they just want a hand up or a leg up.
Yes.
I think people, even at their lowest ebb, have an inbuilt pride. They don't want to be seen as taking charity. No. They and I know there's a councillor in Offaly, Ken Smullen, and he does amazing work. And Ken has been on with us a lot, and the stories that Ken tells, with the permission of families ringing him up and finally at their lowest ebb saying, I haven't any food in the house. And I'm thinking, dear God, this is 2021. And there are people who haven't got food for themselves, let alone for their children, or food for their children, let alone themselves, whichever way you want to look at it. And I don't understand why people are not out in the streets, left, right, and centre. But I do believe that there's a lot of what's going on now is an attempt, as you say, to curtail protest.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think there's a lot of people want to protest, but they're waiting for others to do it. So
I think that's it. I think we've been forced into a nervous state by the government, what we can and can't do. So we have choice, but it's being restricted at the moment. And people are saying, oh, can we go out and demonstrate? Can't we go out and demonstrate? The guys going to come and break it up.
It's wall-to-wall depression. It's almost like it's psychological warfare. When you turn on the TV and you have media personnel, media people, just talking at you about COVID, vaccine. And you look at Britain, and Britain is more or less back to normal.
Yeah.
Every country is more or less back to normal. At some stage, we have got to say, I think we have got to say that this is here in the same way as flu, and that we have got to try and live with it. How long is how much is enough? People have almost 2 years lost their livelihoods. There's places closing down left, right, and centre.
Yeah.
What good, I mean, I don't understand how healthy is that for a person to see the business they grew for forever, that was in their family forever, having to be closed down. What good is that for them emotionally, psychologically, and financially?
Yeah, and I mean, like teenagers, that they've had, 2 years taken off their lives, no fun, no graduations, no leaving cert, the list goes on. And then again, for the elderly, just even to be able to, go to a friend's house or go to the clubs, like the great clubs that are in Limerick. I mean, that was just depriving people. No wonder our sanity is at an all-time low, to be honest.
It's just, I don't understand it all. I just think that it has been handled shockingly badly. From day one, when people were being allowed fly in and fly out, and you had government ministers flying in, even the other day, the COP27, COP27, they flew in on their private jets for COP27. And you're saying to yourself, could they not have used Zoom? If the climate was as bad as it's supposed to be, and we had our own Micheál Martin out there to speak for 3 minutes, just to be seen. I don't think it's anything about being right. I just think it's about being first. Yes. Let Ireland be the first country to bring in to have everyone vaccinated. Well, we can see now, they said if 70% were vaccinated, that would be okay. Now, they're saying 90% are vaccinated, but yet 50% of the people in the hospital are vaccinated and 50% are not. But so how can 7% of a population infect 50% of the patients that are in hospital? I don't understand it, and we're not being allowed to hear another voice.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you know?
Hopefully we'll get through this year, and hopefully we'll be out of lockdown, because, as I say, I think Limerick hasn't got a great mental health at the moment, and we see that with the amount of times people going into the river. And is this what they're actually forcing us to do now? Because the mental health services aren't there either for people, and people not being able to do a one-to-one is very difficult, or if their services have been taken off them, I think it's making a big difference to mental health as well.
Yeah, and I have Limerick Suicide Watch on with me. We next Wednesday. Thought it was this morning, but it's next Wednesday morning at 11 o'clock. We have one of the highest rates of suicide certainly in the country, if not even further, I believe. And I can be contradicted on that now, and I'm open to contradiction, but we have hugely high rates of suicide. And I just worry about all this lockdown and how it's affecting the suicide rate, how it's affecting families living with abusers, whether they're a wife or a husband, or whether a child is being abused and they have nowhere to go, because they're with emergency laws and with that, people are being told what happens when the place that's you're supposed to be safe is the least safe place in the world for you.
Yeah,
and you
that they
can't
said
get out or
domestic.
see your friends to tell them.
Yeah, they said domestic abuse went through the roof during lockdown, and you can understand. And for an abuser, it was the ideal time because no one would find out what they were doing. And that's shocking that, children and husbands or wives or whatever it is, but the abusers were out there and they were in force. And of course, no one knew what was happening at the time.
I mean, if your abuser is with you 24/7 because they can't leave the house, you can't get to a phone because they're there all the time.
Yeah.
And there's so many permutations. It's not straight. If this was an ideal world, you'd be happy and safe in your own home. But
Yeah.
it's not. And then, as I say, there are so many people who haven't got the luxury of a home.
Exactly. And I mean,
but
I
Sarah,
think
what is next for you? What is your next move, or what are you going to be doing now next and pushing for?
Well, I suppose I've built a team up in Limerick where we have 5 people running for the local elections. And what we stated as Aontú was that we weren't just going to be out there at election time. So I'm proud to say that I've been out doing street homelessness now for over 12 months. I've got 340 families I'm dealing with, would you believe, full housing. And that's where they're coming to us, and we make representations to the council for properties. But it's hard work, trying to get onto council officials, and all we're getting is that you're down for housing and you'll be considered alongside any other applicant. And that drives me insane, because other councils, like up in Dublin, if you're 200th on the list and 199 houses are given out, then you can be damn sure you're the next person. But there seems to be this big myth in Limerick Council of where people are on the housing lists, and that just adds to the frustration.
The housing list should be transparent. People
Exactly.
should, number one, see it. And in my view, the person who's the longest without a home should be the first. They should be at the top of the list. If you're, if you're 2 years in a hotel, or a year and a half in a hotel, I think you should be entitled to a house before somebody who hasn't been through that system. It's a sad state of affairs when we have people living in hotel rooms.
It's nowhere for children to be. The fact is that they can't do homework sitting at a table. They can't eat properly like you and I, because they're living off takeaways, because there's no cooking facilities. And the list goes on. And what some of the saddest things I ever see is when people are making their Holy Communions or the confirmations, and the pictures are actually in the hotel. And that just actually is heart-wrenching, because no little child should be living like that. I just think...
But not in this day and age, when they can come up with billions of euro for different, when they can come up with that white elephant of a hospital that was being built, for a children's hospital, that was nowhere near anybody other than if you were from Dublin. You were just, discommoded if you were coming from Galway, if you were coming from the west of Ireland. And it, what started off as, I forget how much it was, it's starting off, but it ended up over $1 billion.
I know.
And it still hasn't been built. And all that money, and yet houses, there's houses and apartments at the end of my road now being built. And I don't know what the situation is, or what way they're allocating those houses. They're where the Pike Inn used to be.
Oh, I know it. Again, I've got loads of people in for those houses, and but there's no clarity of who's going to get them, because you'd think if you come from the area that really those people, if you're in Garryowen or something like that, you're in an overcrowded situation or you've become homeless, surely they would give them out to people from the area, but they don't. They just...
I live in St. Lawrence Park, which is just opposite it, and everyone that lives in St. Lawrence Park, all the houses are privately owned, but if somebody moves on or that, they will the house to and it comes to the next, it's always a family member that moves in. We've never had anybody really, very few people who aren't family members around or related or grew up in the Pike, which would be in front of the mental hospital. There were houses there. So everyone in this cul-de-sac are either related or neighbours for generations and generations. And that's the way the houses have gone. One person dies and the house goes to a family member. And there's plenty of people in Garryowen who are homeless.
I'm from Keene Street originally. That's our family home. That's where my mother's from. So I grew up and played around Garryowen. And I'm sure you're aware of the house on the end of St. Lawrence's Park. I mean, I had to physically go in and clean that up because people were dumping in there. The old lady had died, and the house is up for sale on the very corner.
That on the Singling Crescent side?
On Pike Avenue side.
Pike Avenue side, yeah. I know that. I know the house you're talking about.
Yeah, in the lockdown, the amount of dumping that went in there, and I had to physically get in there with a couple of my friends and clean it up because there was shower units, there was TVs, you've never seen anything like it. So when houses are boarded up or they become vacant, they become an area for antisocial behaviour. And I have a video of children running up.
That's the danger of derelict buildings.
Yeah.
And that house, I can remember that house as a child, and the people living in it, the lady that lived in it, an old lady, she was just lovely. And the family that lived in it, all along and over time, when a house becomes derelict, as you say, it just becomes a target for people who don't have.
I actually went in with one of the family members because the back door was broken into. And they actually burnt out some of the house, and she had a load of holy relics and statues, and they were just thrown all over the floor, smashed. And I said, that is so disrespectful to the family that, are living.
But it's so disrespectful to anybody who's on. It's a further slap in the face, if one were needed, to people who haven't got a home, who would just give everything they had to have that home.
Yeah. And I know people in Garryowen are nervous who's going to get those properties because they've already been a target for antisocial behaviour. The windows have been smashed. These are the new ones that are being built. I've got a video recording of children running across the roofs of these new houses. And I actually spoke to one of the builders that was in there, and she said, you know what, we can't even leave a tool at night because they're coming in and stealing them.
We're almost like we're in a bubble where I live, because, as I say, I'm only a minute from it, but yet we're in our own little bubble.
Yeah.
Everybody, everyone we're lucky here in that respect. Everybody knows everybody, and we have a great guy in our neighborhood who goes out regularly cutting the lawn in the middle of the green, and a few of us have planted flowers around the trees that are in the center, so it's like our own little nirvana where we are, and I didn't actually even know that there was antisocial behavior there.
Yeah, and it's only children about the age of 8. But we're seeing this even when we do homeless outreach. We have been targeted by young children, 8 or 9, that are actually spitting at the homeless. Can you imagine that?
But look, that starts in the home. I mean, that comes from the home. I know that when we were growing up, if there was a report made, there was never a report, but I know that you wouldn't be able to sit for a week. Especially when you had a mother who was rearing you on her own, and because Dad was in England for a long time, and she was mother and father. So, and all my friends, they would have been, as the favourite saying at the time, lockjawed. A lockjaw.
Yeah.
Just
Well, we
amazing.
were the same. We got taught so much respect, I suppose, by my nana and granddad in Limerick. And they said people in those days had nothing, but you had respect for your
You had
neighbours.
respect for your neighbor.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that's lost.
And your neighbor was, I mean, there was often times when our neighbors would actually give out to us as much. My mother could give out to my friend and my friends as much as their parents could give out to me. And I remember being slapped by a neighbor because she was slapping her own daughter, so she slapped me. And my mom said, "That's fine. You know, I mean, you deserved it."
Yeah, my mother used to always say the same to me. If you got a slap, it's because you deserved it. And I most probably get another one from her because I've been in trouble.
Yeah, that brings up a whole new topic altogether, Sarah. We could be here all day long. It's just been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Sarah.
But it's just been like being, if we weren't in semi-lockdown, it'd be like having a cup of coffee with each other.
Yeah, it's just, I think that's the best way to do these shows, is to just make people feel like they're just having a cup of coffee, because like we're deprived of so much physical contact. I suppose it's the way I am anyway. I suppose I try to create that physicality beyond this barrier of a lens, if you like. But it was a pleasure talking to you, Sarah, and I commend you for what you're doing. And
thank you.
As somebody, I suppose, who knows, I mean, as I say, we had a lovely home in England and we had a lovely home here, but God love my mother. She struggled so hard because of the fact that it was subsiding, and she was obsessive compulsive, which made it even worse.
Yeah.
Everything had to be clean and high. She was everything, you know, and everything had to have a place. And when you can't, that adds to your mental and emotional turmoil, when you haven't got, and you're not allowed to do anything to the house, but yet they're telling you there's nothing wrong and it's structurally sound, until it falls in on top of you. Well, or we were lucky, we were just out a month when it, I think it was a month when the roof came in first and then the walls. Do you know? So someone was praying.
God.
And I do understand where, you know, the problems people are having in this country as a whole. Do you know? And I commend you and Aontú for what you're doing. And I hope you grow from strength to strength.
Thank you.
So, Sarah, thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
You're welcome.
Thank you, and take care of yourself.
You too.
All right, bye-bye.
And Shindera leis an Clare. That's the end of the show for today. Until the next time, Lacúnmh Day. B'Wallam tú go léir Chiacana, Sonas agus Gra. I wish you peace, happiness, and love. Agus Gadeish of Slán. Slán.
Bye-bye, Slán of all.
Bye.
Bye.